In the waning light of a world still young with memory, roads did not simply connect villages or fields. They intersected not only in space but in uncertainty, where the living brushed against what they could not name. At the meeting of roads, certainty dissolved. Here, the earth held a strange attentiveness, a waiting that was older than any human voice. Mist clung to the soil as if it were aware of the wandering feet that passed over it, and shadows gathered at angles the eye could not entirely follow. These were not simply places to walk through, but thresholds, liminal spaces where one's own choices faltered under an invisible pressure. Long before temples were raised in orderly squares, before altars were gilded or statues carved in reverence, humans understood instinctively that some places did not belong to the living alone. Crossroads, unclaimed clearings, the edges of forests where the light of day faltered, they were marked by an ineffable tension. Something lingered there, something that watched, that knew, that demanded acknowledgement. It was not a monster in the conventional sense, nor a spirit to be banished with fire. It was more subtle, more patient. It was a presence defined by avoidance, by respect mingled with fear. This presence, later named Hecate, was never the goddess of home or hearth. She was the sentinel of thresholds, a guardian of places humans would cross but never quite inhabit. Her domain was not carved from marble or inscribed on clay. It was written into the landscape itself, into the nervous hesitation of a traveler, the shiver that traveled along the spine when one approached a shadowed junction at twilight. Hecate did not impose her will by force. She whispered it through the quiet insistence of the crossroads, in the subtle geometry of space where one choice became many, and certainty ceased. To understand Hecate is to understand that ancient people perceived the world not as a neutral expanse but as a living network of thresholds and dangers. In a time when death was ever present, when sickness could arrive overnight and the night itself carried predators beyond human comprehension, the crossroads were sites of profound vulnerability. A lone traveler, caught between directions, faced more than the risk of getting lost. They faced the possibility that the unseen might notice their hesitation, might extend its influence into their very fate. The crossroads were a mirror of human decision, and Hecate was the reflection of the mind's recognition that not all choices are benign, not all paths are safe. In art and myth, she is often depicted with 3 faces, 3 bodies or 3 torches, symbolizing her ability to see multiple directions simultaneously, to inhabit multiple realms at once. This triadic form was not mere embellishment. It was a symbolic map of the human encounter with ambiguity. Every road that split, every path that forked into uncertainty, was under her silent governance. She did not prevent travelers from choosing. She revealed to them the gravity of the choice itself, and the shadow that followed each decision. Psychologically, the crossroads reflect an eternal human confrontation with ambiguity. In these spaces, the mind recognizes its own limitations, the inability to know outcomes, the inescapable fact that every decision is a step into the unknown. Hecate embodies this tension. She is the goddess of hesitation, of careful observance, and of respect for forces beyond mortal comprehension. To invoke her to leave offerings at a road's junction was not simply superstition. It was an acknowledgement of the human condition, an act of humility in the face of uncertainty. Archaeological traces hint at her enduring presence in daily life. Small votive offerings, scattered along worn tracks, suggest that humans sought to placate a power both protective and terrifying. Animals, particularly dogs, were sometimes included in these rituals, hinting at a symbiosis between human anxiety and the natural world, an understanding that the boundaries between seen and unseen were patrolled not by sword and wall, but by attentiveness, by ritual, by careful attention to the liminal. It is tempting to dismiss the crossroads as mere geography, but for those who lived in its proximity, it was a space that demanded mindfulness, patience, and a touch of reverence. In the shadows of the evening, as one road met another under the fading light, one could feel the latent power of Hecate, not threatening, not malevolent, but insistent in its claim. She was the quiet reminder that life is often a matter of navigation, of choices measured in hesitation as much as in action. To encounter her, even briefly, was to confront the human soul at its most tentative, most watchful. And so the crossroads endure in memory as they did in reality, places both feared and honored. They are the spaces where certainty cannot exist, where every step is an acknowledgement of the unknown. Hecate was not merely a goddess of the night or of magic. She was a custodian of the invisible weights that press upon human decision, the silent witness to the choices that define a life. In the stillness of a world untouched by the certainty of modern maps, at the point where one path forks into 3, 4 or many more, one can almost hear the whisper that began centuries ago. Choose carefully, for some paths are watched, and some decisions never return to the light. Hecate waits there still, in the intersection of fear and curiosity, in the space where paths refuse to choose. Hecate was never a goddess of hearth or home. While other deities presided over fires that warmed bodies, over altars that gathered the faithful, Hecate belonged to no fixed sanctuary. Her presence was not defined by bricks or stone, nor by incense rising in a temple's ordered air. She lingered instead in spaces that existed between certainty and abandonment, in the margins where human comfort faltered. Crossroads, dark forests, abandoned fields, these were her altars. Her worship was itinerant, her sacred sites as mutable as shadow. To invoke her was to step outside the familiar, to place trust in forces uncontained and unrestrained by walls. In the fragmented landscapes of ancient Greece, she appeared as a liminal figure, a goddess whose influence could not be confined. Priests and cults recorded her name with reverence, yet she was often absent from the grand narratives of mythology. Hecate did not fit the tidy categories of divinity. She was not Olympian in the strict sense, nor bound to a city-state's identity. She belonged to travelers, to those who worked at night, to the marginalized, and to those who sought knowledge in secret. Her freedom mirrored the uncertainty of life itself, a reminder that some power resides not in domination but in elusiveness. The absence of a hearth was a statement, deliberate and profound. Fire that warms can also consume. Shelter that protects can also imprison. Hecate's domain rejected domesticity because she governed what humans could not own. She was a goddess of independence, of vigilance, of the sacred unclaimed. In the glow of a torch at twilight, one could feel her presence not through sight, but through the subtle shift of perception, the sudden attentiveness to sound, to the movement of air, to the uncharted edges of the landscape. Historically, her liminality served a function beyond ritual. Communities understood that there are forces best acknowledged but not domesticated, energies that shape the world in subtle ways beyond human comprehension. Hecate was the embodiment of this knowledge. By venerating a deity without walls, humans cultivated an awareness of the invisible boundaries that govern life and death, chance and choice. Her freedom was a lesson in humility, a reminder that not all power can or should be possessed. Psychologically, Hecate resonates with the fear and fascination of the unknown. She exists in the threshold of human experience, where comfort is absent and the mind must navigate uncertainty without guidance. This is a space of vigilance, of imagination, of awe. In her absence from temples, she demands presence in thought. In her refusal to reside in one place, she teaches that awareness and caution are sacred acts. Those who sought her blessing knew they were engaging not with an image, but with an idea made flesh, a living reflection of humanity's encounter with the uncontrollable. Artistic representations of Hecate reinforce this duality of presence and absence. In coins, in reliefs, in small figurines, she appears holding torches, keys, or daggers, symbols of illumination, access, and protection. Yet these images never dominate the frame. She is almost always shown at the periphery, at the edge of a scene, a reminder that her power is to be sensed more than commanded. She thrives in the margins, in places we overlook, in moments we do not fully understand. Even her mythology reflects this displacement. Hecate moves between worlds, earth, sky, and the underworld. She acts where boundaries blur, where life meets death, where knowledge collides with fear. Her absence from hearths does not diminish her importance. It magnifies it. She claims those spaces humans neglect, watches over what society ignores, and governs the unseen with a patience beyond human reckoning. In a world dominated by order and hierarchy, Hecate is a sovereign of what cannot be ordered, a ruler of flux and shadow. Cinematically, one might imagine a lone figure standing at the edge of a forest as dusk falls, the wind whispering through the branches. The figure does not seek warmth, does not carry provisions, does not look for comfort. Instead, they sense a presence, a watchfulness that belongs to no home, to no city, to no priestly authority. This is Hecate. She is present not because she demands attention, but because she occupies what humans have forsaken. To feel her near is to acknowledge that the world contains realms humans cannot fully inhabit, and that some wisdom comes only from observing what we cannot control. In reflecting on her absence from hearths, we confront our own relationship with power, with the unknown, and with the spaces society deems irrelevant. Hecate teaches that reverence does not require possession, that influence does not demand visibility, that strength may reside not in containment but in liberty. Her very being is a lesson in patience and attentiveness, an education in humility for those who would walk between worlds. And so, in the dim light where roads intersect and shadows deepen, Hecate lingers still, a goddess without a hearth, whose presence is measured not by fire or stone, but by the stillness and attention she evokes in those who dare to pass beyond the familiar. She reminds us that some spaces, like some truths, are never meant to be possessed, only honored and navigated with care. The world of the ancients was not measured in hours, nor in the steady rhythm of clocks, but in the slow surrender of light. Night was a force, immense and uncharted, a cloak that fell over forests, rivers, and villages with the quiet inevitability of the tides. It was in this half-light that Hecate first revealed herself, not as a threat, but as a witness. The first humans to notice her did not name her, did not carve her likeness, yet they felt her presence in the trembling shadows at the edge of firelight, in the silence that followed the animals' retreat. The night itself was a world of risk and revelation. Wolves howled beyond the horizon, unseen eyes tracked every movement, and the air carried scents that told of hunger, disease, and death. In such darkness, the human mind reached outward for meaning, for guardianship, for a pattern to contain fear. Hecate occupied that space with a calm precision, her form emerging in imagination and instinct alike. She became the first witness to what humans could not control, the unpredictable, the uncertain, the unaccounted for horrors that crept along the periphery of life. Historically, Hecate's association with night reflects a broader understanding of liminality in ancient cultures. Darkness was not merely absence of light. It was a realm in which the ordinary laws of life were suspended, and where choices could bear consequences invisible until dawn. In this setting she guided and observed. Her presence gave structure to chaos, a framework in which humans could act with awareness. The torch she carried was both literal and symbolic, a small flame that pierced shadow, a beacon of vigilance and caution in a world governed by unpredictability. Psychologically, the association of Hecate with night mirrors the human encounter with fear itself. Darkness exposes the mind's capacity for imagination, for projection, for anxiety. To acknowledge Hecate was to acknowledge that fear is not simply an obstacle but a guide, a signal to move carefully, to respect what cannot be tamed. The goddess became an externalization of this awareness, a figure who could be appeased, consulted, or feared, and thus transformed abstract anxiety into a tangible ritual. In the rituals of antiquity, offerings were often left at night, at crossroads, or in hidden clearings, as a way of negotiating with forces beyond comprehension. Torches illuminated these rituals, but their light also delineated boundaries. Inside the sacred circle, humans acted. Outside, the goddess watched. Hecate was a witness not only to actions but to intentions, to hesitation, to the subtle rhythms of human thought in the absence of social order. She observed the beginning of journeys, the choices made in secrecy, and the faint tremors of conscience that accompany moments of moral or practical uncertainty. The night she oversees is both literal and metaphorical. It is the moment when clarity fades and instinct rises, when mortality is felt most keenly, when the human mind confronts its limitations. Hecate, in her quiet vigilance, transforms this confrontation into a ritualized acknowledgement, a navigation of the spaces where knowledge ends and intuition begins. Her presence at twilight, in the first moments when the day relents, is a reminder that perception is never complete, that insight often comes in fragments, and that human awareness is always bounded by what we cannot yet see. In art and literature, Hecate's nocturnal aspect is often expressed through her triple form, her torches, or her silent companions, typically black dogs or other creatures associated with liminality. These symbols are more than embellishments. They communicate the ancient understanding that night is a domain of multiplicity, where one entity can occupy many roles, where observation and influence can coexist without intrusion. She is simultaneously guardian and observer, illuminator and harbinger, presence and absence. The nocturnal landscape of ancient life was perilous, but also sacred. Forests, caves, and crossroads at night were seen as liminal zones, spaces where interaction with the divine was possible precisely because human control was absent. Hecate's emergence as a night goddess reflects this logic. She was neither punitive nor indulgent. She was attentive. She witnessed the vulnerabilities and strengths of humans, observing the courage it took to move through darkness, the humility in acknowledging forces beyond comprehension, and the insight born of quiet vigilance. In contemporary reflection, Hecate reminds us that night is not merely a backdrop for fear but a medium for awareness. To walk in darkness is to confront uncertainty, to recognize limits, to cultivate attentiveness. She endures because humans remain the same, drawn to paths they cannot fully know, compelled to act in spaces where visibility is limited, haunted by forces both external and internal. The night she inhabits is both a physical reality and a psychological landscape, where the mind, the heart, and the spirit encounter themselves fully. And so, in the dimming light of dusk, at the edge of the known and the unknown, Hecate watches still. Not to punish, not to terrify, but to witness. To remind that the first step into darkness is never without consequence, and that those who acknowledge the unseen move with a wisdom far older than memory. In her vigilance, the night itself becomes a teacher, and in that teaching, the human soul learns to navigate what cannot be tamed. Thresholds are not merely physical. They are statements written in the language of space. A doorway, a gate, a bridge over water. They are not neutral constructions, but moments of transition, spaces charged with potential. The ancients understood this with an instinct that modern eyes can scarcely feel. The threshold is where one world ends and another begins, where action meets consequence, where safety dissolves into risk. And at every threshold, Hecate waits. Her dominion was never limited to the crossroads of paths, but extended to every liminal space where humans might hesitate. Doors into homes, entrances to city walls, and the narrow passages between hills and forests, all became arenas for her influence. She spoke through these thresholds, not with words but with presence. Every hesitation, every pause before crossing, was a silent dialogue with the goddess. She communicated a language older than speech, one of careful observation, subtle warning, and moral awareness. Historically, thresholds were deeply symbolic in ritual and daily life. Entering a home or sacred space required gestures of respect, offerings or prayers. The boundary between inside and outside, between sacred and profane, between life and death, was never taken lightly. Hecate governed these spaces because she understood the weight of transition. A threshold is a moment of decision, a reflection of the human mind at its most attentive and its most vulnerable. Psychologically, the threshold embodies human anxiety and potential. Crossing it requires courage, calculation, and reverence. The goddess does not punish those who hesitate. She observes them, teaching that awareness is itself a form of protection. Humans, in turn, learned to interpret the subtle signs around them. A sudden chill, the cry of a dog, the rustle of leaves in windless air. These were not random. They were the vocabulary of the liminal, the language in which Hecate spoke. Symbolically, thresholds communicate the duality of human experience. They are places of birth and death, arrival and departure, endings and beginnings. Hecate's presence ensures that the crossing is never trivialized. In mythology, she is invoked at entrances to the underworld, at crossroads, and at spaces where offerings are left to appease spirits. In every instance, she reminds humans that transition carries consequence, that boundaries matter, and that the act of crossing is itself sacred. In art, Hecate often holds keys or torches, signifying her role as both guide and gatekeeper. She is attentive to movement, aware of hesitation, and present where the human mind is most alert. Her attention is subtle but unyielding. She occupies every margin, every space of choice, every place where paths divide and decisions bear weight. Even today, the psychology of thresholds remains potent. We experience trepidation when stepping into unknown spaces, when beginning journeys, when facing choices that will shape the course of life. Hecate, in her timeless presence, embodies this human truth. She is the guardian not of obstacles but of awareness, the teacher not of force but of vigilance, the witness not of folly but of attentiveness. At twilight, at the edge of villages, at the meeting point of paths and homes, her influence is quietly felt. She does not speak, but her language is clear. Respect the boundary, honor the passage, recognize the power inherent in every choice. To understand Hecate is to understand that human life is defined not only by action, but by perception, by the attention we give to the spaces we traverse, and by the reverence we show for the thresholds we cross. In that silent observation, the goddess without a hearth teaches us a profound lesson. That life is lived in the spaces between certainty and hesitation, that every crossing carries meaning, and that the human spirit grows strongest where the unknown is approached with care. Hecate remains there at every threshold, a witness to decision, a guardian of liminality, a reminder that the spaces we pass through are more than mere geography. They are the language of our own attentiveness, written across the contours of the world. At the edge of human settlements, where paths faded into shadowed woods or open plains, the lost wandered. Some were travelers who had underestimated the day's length, others souls carried beyond the familiar by chance or misfortune. In these moments of disorientation, when fear and fatigue intertwined, Hecate emerged. She bore torches not to guide blindly, but to illuminate the consequences of wandering, to reveal the fragility of human knowledge in the face of the unknown. Her flames were both a warning and a witness, a reflection of the choices that brought one into uncertainty. The torch is an ancient symbol of vigilance. Across cultures, fire represents life, protection, and knowledge. Yet in Hecate's hands, it assumes a liminal quality. It does not banish darkness entirely, but delineates where humans may tread safely and where danger begins. Historical accounts and votive inscriptions suggest that travelers left offerings at crossroads and along forgotten roads, invoking her presence to mark their passage. These were not acts of devotion alone. They were acknowledgments of vulnerability, rituals that recognized forces that could neither be controlled nor ignored. Psychologically, the lost are a mirror of human consciousness in moments of uncertainty. Hecate's role as torchbearer reflects a recognition of the mind's need for guidance, tempered by respect for its limitations. She illuminates without interference, allowing humans to confront fear while remaining observed. Her attention is never punitive. It is instructive. It reminds us that to wander is not failure, but an encounter with the unknown, and that in the absence of certainty, awareness becomes a sacred form of agency. In art and mythology, Hecate's torches often appear in triplicate, a triad of light against encroaching shadow. This multiplicity reflects the complex paths of human life, decisions that divide, intentions that ripple unseen, outcomes that cannot be fully predicted. Her light is never static. It flickers and shifts, a testament to the dynamism of liminal spaces. The lost, therefore, are never abandoned. They are observed, their movements recorded in the tapestry of the goddess's vigilance, as if every hesitation, every misstep, becomes part of a sacred geography. Her presence at the peripheries of human habitation also reflects a social truth. Those marginalized, abandoned, or ostracized often find themselves in metaphorical crossroads, spaces of vulnerability where oversight is rare. Hecate's guardianship over the lost is a mirror of humanity's understanding of responsibility, caution, and moral attention. She watches not only travelers but those pushed to the edges of society, holding space for what civilization overlooks or discards. To witness Hecate with her torch is to witness a delicate interplay between illumination and darkness, knowledge and ignorance. The traveler feels a presence that is at once protective and unsettling, a guide who demands respect for the journey, for the choices, and for the unknown. Even today, the symbolism persists. Torches at crossroads, candles lit in memory, lights carried at night. All echo the ancient awareness that wandering without guidance is a risk, and that vigilance itself can be sacred. And so, at every unlit path, every forgotten trail, and every threshold into uncertainty, Hecate stands with torches raised, illuminating the lost not to remove the shadow, but to honor the journey. She teaches that in wandering, humans encounter the essence of liminality, the necessary balance between fear and courage, observation and action. The torch is her language, and in its flickering light, we see the reflection of our own fragile, searching consciousness. In the ancient world, the cry of dogs carried meaning beyond ordinary sound. Their howls were omens, signals, a language attuned to the invisible currents of life and death. Hecate's companions, black dogs of myth and folklore, became her emissaries, her heralds in the liminal spaces where mortality brushed closely against the living. They were witnesses and guides, their voices the first alert to unseen presences, the harbingers of events yet to unfold. Historical texts and classical accounts describe dogs associated with thresholds, cemeteries and crossroads, spaces where Hecate's influence was strongest. The presence of these animals, their mournful or urgent cries, was interpreted as a sign of the goddess's attention. In this way, the natural world and the supernatural were intertwined. Animals were more than companions. They were interpreters of the unseen, guardians of liminal space, and symbols of humanity's fragile interface with forces beyond comprehension. Psychologically, the dogs represent the externalization of fear and intuition. Humans, sensitive to patterns and anomaly, interpreted their behavior as a reflection of danger, mortality, and unseen presences. Hecate, in myth, mediates between human perception and cosmic reality. She is neither malevolent nor benevolent but attentive. The dog's cries serve as a subtle reminder of mortality and the limits of human understanding. They warn of death, but also teach the observer to act with awareness and respect for the threshold between life and what lies beyond. Culturally, dogs were left offerings or honored in rituals at crossroads and grave sites, acknowledging their sacred connection to Hecate. In doing so, humans recognized the link between animal perception and divine insight, between instinct and reverence. Black dogs in particular became a visual and symbolic signifier of this liminality. Silent, vigilant, and ever at the edges of human consciousness, their presence bridging the ordinary and the extraordinary. Hecate's association with dogs underscores a profound human truth, that guidance and warning may come in forms we do not fully understand, and that attentiveness is as sacred as action. In every howl echoing across a moonlit field, there is a lesson about mortality, intuition, and the presence of forces unseen yet undeniable. The goddess, through her emissaries, transforms instinct into awareness, terror into cautious respect, and the unknown into a landscape that can be navigated with humility. In reflecting on Hecate's nocturnal companions, one realizes that humans have always been attuned to subtle signs, receptive to patterns that transcend immediate comprehension. The black dog is a bridge between the visible and invisible, a living testament to the goddess's dominion over thresholds of life and death. To hear its cry is to recognize the ongoing dialogue between the mortal mind and the ineffable. And so, wherever the howl pierces the night, Hecate listens and watches, her presence marked in the trembling ears of humans and the silent attentiveness of animals. Death and vigilance are intertwined, and through these companions, the goddess teaches that life is measured not merely by action but by observation, by listening, and by the humility to acknowledge what we cannot fully control. Death in the ancient world was never a simple transition. It demanded ritual, recognition, and remembrance. Yet some died alone, violently, or without ceremony. Their bodies denied the rights that bound the living and the dead. Hecate became the queen of these unburied souls, a custodian of the restless, a presence attending to those whom society could not or would not honor. She gathered what was neglected, holding the spirits of the abandoned in the sanctity of her liminal domain. Historical accounts of funerary customs in Greece reveal the importance of ritual for maintaining cosmic balance. Those who lacked proper rites were feared, their spirits believed capable of wandering and inflicting misfortune. Hecate's governance of the unburied reflects a recognition that mortality is not only biological but social. The act of remembrance anchors the living and the dead. In this context, she is neither malevolent nor indifferent. She is the guardian of what humanity has failed to acknowledge, giving form to neglect and attention to absence. Psychologically, the unburied represent humanity's fear of oblivion and its moral responsibility to others. Hecate embodies the tension between societal oversight and cosmic justice, offering refuge to the lost and absent. She transforms fear into structure, chaos into recognition, and abandonment into ritualized presence. To engage with Hecate in this context is to confront the fragility of life and the necessity of remembrance. Her association with cemeteries, crossroads, and desolate places underlines her function as a mediator between the living and the dead. She oversees transitions that cannot be controlled, holding a silent vigil over the restless. The unburied are never forgotten. In her presence, they are acknowledged, their stories woven into the ongoing consciousness of humanity. Symbolically, Hecate teaches that attention and ritual matter. She is a reminder that neglect carries consequence, and that even absence is meaningful. Her care for the unburied transforms societal oversight into moral awareness, illuminating the shadows that human civilization often leaves unattended. In observing Hecate's watch over the unburied, one recognizes a fundamental truth. Life and death are intertwined, and vigilance, remembrance, and ritual are necessary to navigate their intersection. The goddess transforms abandonment into sacred attentiveness, and in doing so, she endures as both guardian and witness, queen of those whom humanity has forsaken but whom divinity will never ignore. Long before the word which carried the weight of accusation, persecution, or superstition, magic existed as a language of survival. It was born in the observation of herbs, in the rhythm of seasons, in the quiet experiment of human curiosity against the chaos of nature. Hecate presided over this early practice, not as a demonized figure, but as a custodian of knowledge that walked the line between the seen and unseen. Her authority was liminal, guiding those who sought to manipulate forces beyond the ordinary without arrogating dominion over them. In historical context, Greek sources often connect Hecate with spells, charms, and knowledge of herbs, particularly those used for protection or healing. This knowledge was dangerous in a world governed by superstition and necessity alike. The goddess's oversight of such practices suggests an early moral and psychological framework. Magic was not merely a tool, but a responsibility. The practitioner had to respect the unseen and acknowledge the weight of action, for every invocation bore consequences both subtle and profound. Psychologically, Hecate embodies the tension between fear and empowerment. Magic was a manifestation of humanity's attempt to exert control in a universe governed by uncertainty, disease, and death. By situating herself as an arbiter of this practice, she imposed a moral compass upon knowledge itself, a gentle but firm reminder that the unseen must be approached with awareness. Those who practiced under her watchfulness learned humility, patience, and vigilance, understanding that their actions could ripple through worlds beyond perception. Her association with witchcraft is a reflection not of malevolence, but of liminality. Herbs, potions, chants, and spells all exist at thresholds, between life and death, health and sickness, success and failure. Hecate's role was to guide humans through these transitions, to illuminate paths that curiosity might otherwise traverse blindly. In this way, magic is not fantasy. It is a dialogue with the natural and supernatural, a conversation that requires attention, respect, and reverence. Even today, the archetype of Hecate as the goddess of wisdom and occult knowledge persists. She reminds us that human curiosity, when tempered with respect, can reveal truths hidden in plain sight. In the flickering light of her torches, we see not chaos but structure, not malevolence but guidance, not domination but insight. She teaches that knowledge carries responsibility, that liminality requires mindfulness, and that true power lies not in force, but in understanding the worlds we cannot fully see. Hecate's influence extends to the beginnings and endings of life itself. She was invoked in childbirth, sought during labor, feared in miscarriage. In her duality, she embodies the paradox of creation, nurturing yet exacting, life-giving yet unforgiving. Ancient cultures understood that birth and death are inseparable, that every moment of emergence is shadowed by potential loss. Hecate's presence at these thresholds reminds humanity of the fragility of life and the indifference of fate. Historically, offerings to Hecate were made to ensure safe delivery, protect infants, and honor lost lives. Her guardianship encompassed both celebration and mourning, revealing a nuanced understanding of mortality. She is neither cruel nor capricious. She reflects the realities of existence, where life's beginnings and endings are intertwined with forces beyond comprehension. The goddess's impartiality is a lesson in acceptance, teaching that suffering is as instructive as joy, and that reverence must extend to all stages of being. Psychologically, Hecate mirrors the human confrontation with loss and uncertainty. Birth brings hope but also fear. Miscarriage brings grief, but also insight into mortality's inevitability. She embodies the tension between creation and destruction, illustrating that life is inseparable from risk and vulnerability. To engage with her is to recognize that human experience is defined not only by survival, but by acknowledgement of its impermanence. In art, Hecate is often depicted holding torches, keys, or knives, symbols of illumination, transition, and protection. These attributes reflect the delicate balance she maintains, the guidance of new life, the attention to endings, and the oversight of what lies between. She is present in silence, watching the intimate moments where human life is most fragile, where courage and fear are inseparable, and where the sacredness of existence is most profoundly felt. As the Olympian hierarchy solidified, Hecate receded from prominence. She was neither expelled nor destroyed. She simply shifted into shadow. While Zeus and Athena commanded temples and state rituals, she remained at the margins, attending to spaces that were abandoned, overlooked, or forbidden. Her absence from grand myth does not denote weakness. Rather, it reflects the nature of liminal power. It cannot be centralized, tamed, or displayed. Historical accounts suggest that Hecate retained influence in rural cults and household rites, in crossroads offerings and obscure rituals. Her power was invisible, pervasive, and enduring. She became a goddess who thrived not in public acclaim but in silence, in observation, and in spaces humans often avoided. The obscured divine reflects a human truth. Some forces cannot be appropriated or codified. They exist beyond the reach of hierarchy, law, and narrative. Psychologically, Hecate's concealment mirrors humanity's own tendency to ignore the unknown until it asserts itself. Her quiet presence teaches vigilance, humility, and respect for what cannot be controlled. To perceive her is to understand the enduring potency of what lies unseen, and the enduring consequence of neglecting liminality. With the rise of Christianity, Hecate's liminality was transformed into suspicion. Crossroads, night, magic, and the unburied were recast as dangerous, sinful, or demonic. What ancient cultures understood as moral attentiveness and careful observation became, under new paradigms, evidence of heresy or witchcraft. Yet in this persecution, Hecate did not vanish. She persisted in folklore, in whispered spells, and in the imagination of those who remembered her name. This transformation reflects broader societal mechanisms: fear of the unknown, desire for control, and moral codification. Hecate, once a guide and witness, became a warning. The crossroads, once sacred spaces of observation and choice, became sites of trepidation. Her story demonstrates how human societies convert reverence into prohibition, and how myth adapts to survive within shifting moral landscapes. Psychologically, the Christian reinterpretation of Hecate demonstrates the human tendency to fear that which cannot be fully understood. Hecate endured because the truths she embodies, the liminality of life, the unpredictability of fate, the necessity of vigilance, remain essential, even when culturally suppressed. Despite her marginalization, Hecate survived. She persisted in folk beliefs, nocturnal rituals, and subtle symbols embedded in daily life. She occupies every space humanity ignores: the crossroads at the edge of town, the dark forest beyond the road, the mind's quiet corners where doubt and curiosity converge. Hecate's survival is a testament to the resilience of liminality, to the persistence of attentiveness and respect in the face of neglect. Historically, she was honored in private rituals by travelers, and in places society deemed insignificant. Her presence demonstrates that power is not always centralized, and that influence can persist quietly, beyond notice, through subtle recognition rather than overt authority. Psychologically, Hecate represents the enduring capacity to honor what is overlooked: fears, uncertainties, and boundaries that demand attention. She thrives in the margins, reminding humanity that what is neglected is not irrelevant. Even today, we hesitate at moments of irreversible choice. We feel the weight of transition, the tension of indecision, and the subtle watchfulness of forces beyond understanding. The crossroads, both literal and metaphorical, continue to evoke caution because they represent the unknown. Hecate endures in our collective consciousness because she governs spaces humans cannot conquer, only pass through, carrying the weight of what is observed, honored, and feared. The goddess teaches that life is measured not only by the paths we take, but by the awareness we bring to each crossing. Liminality is eternal, vigilance is sacred, and the unseen continues to shape human perception. To step forward is to acknowledge both the risk and the responsibility inherent in choice, and to recognize that some guardians, like Hecate, wait silently for those who dare to walk beyond the known. Her torches still flicker in imagination, her footsteps echo in stories, and her presence lingers wherever paths meet. She is a reminder that attention, humility, and reverence for the unknown are timeless, and that the spaces we avoid carry lessons older than memory itself. In the crossing of every road, in the hesitation of every decision, we still encounter her. And in encountering her, we are reminded that to navigate the unknown is to honor life itself.